Hello, everyone. Doing some agenda, oops, shuffling. Our agenda is pretty light. Does anyone have any other discussion topics you want to throw in there? Any issues that are worth bringing up in the SLSA repo or updates? I'll paste the notes in the chat.
Hey, Kim, welcome.
Hello,
Join the fun.
David, have you given a recap of your meeting, your famous White House meeting anywhere yet? Are you allowed to talk about it?
Am I allowed to talk about it? You know, you just slip me enough $100 bills, and absolutely. Yeah, I am. I mean, nobody made me swear any vows of secrecy, so.
Perfect. Can I add you to our agenda?
Sure. Now, one challenge is I'm actually double booked today. The good news is that I think the next two meetings I actually get to be here. Hooray. But I'm gonna have to leave after a little bit. But absolutely. So if you wouldn't mind adding me early.
Yeah, I just put you at the top because I can do that quickly.
All right. Granted superpowers, using them immediately. I approve. That's wonderful.
Cool. Yeah, welcome everyone else. Like I was saying, the agenda is a little light, so if there's topics you want to discuss, feel free to throw them in the chat or in the meeting notes doc directly. And I just snuck David in there as our first kind of quick discussion because he was invited with a bunch of folks to go to the White House and talk about supply chain security.
Actually, may I propose that we talk about Kim replacing Zach first since you're talking?
I'm blushing.
Logically, that would make more sense. for those who are surprised.
Awesome. Should I announce myself, Mark?
Absolutely. Sure. Who are you, Kim?
Yeah, so the steering committee and Kim volunteered to join the steering committee because, as Zach announced at the last meeting, he was stepping down. So Kim volunteered. We all voted to say yes. So we're happy to have Kim on the steering committee.
Thank you.
So thank you, Kim.
I'm excited about my new role.
All righty. And you know what's also awesome about this announcement is that this gives me time to slip in a couple URLs.
And for those that don't know me, I can just do a quick intro too.
Oh yeah, please.
Sure. I worked at Google for a while and I actually helped launch the SLSA project with Mark. It was very fun to work on together. And then I got the startup itch and started a company with some folks related to this space. So very excited to still be involved as open source. It's fun. Everyone sees the comment. What is the saying? Same project, same team, different company or something. So it's a bit like that. So yeah, excited to help out with this and see the progress that SLSA has made. I think it's resonating with a lot of folks and it's really interesting to see. Yesterday I was on a call and someone made me laugh because they knew about SLSA and we were asking, you know, do you follow the SLSA levels? And they said, no, we follow the YOLO levels. I thought that was pretty funny. I got a kick out of that. Cool. All right. David.
Sorry.
Okay.
Question. How does your company tie in with SLSA, or what are you doing with your startup, if you don't mind us asking?
Yeah, sure. So we're very new. We're a 3-month-old company. We just put a blog post out last week titled "WTF is Chain Guard." So feel free to check that out to learn a bit more too. But we are focused on helping companies with supply chain security stuff. So the way SLSA fits in is it's resonating with a lot of folks, but they're not quite sure like where to start or how to start adopting something like SLSA. And so we're talking to folks about that journey and trying to help out with tools and services and products. So yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah. So if I can
Oh,
jump in
wow.
on the
Yeah.
next item, are we good with that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so basically, I went to the White House. Well, went to the White House only in a virtual sense. They were going to have it physically, and I was all excited because that was pretty cool. And then they started getting worried about all the COVID restrictions, and they started tamping down. And after Jim Zemlin and Brian Bellendorf flew out to DC to be part of it, they declared it was going to be all virtual. So I was at the White House by being at home calling into a Zoom call, which isn't really the same experience, but that's okay. More importantly, though, that the U.S. White House was very concerned. It was this particular meeting was really triggered by Log4j, um, and basically they were trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do here? I just put in the notes a link to a White House readout, which is actually I thought was a pretty decent summary of a multi-hour meeting. It's hard to summarize something that long in a few words, and I thought that that was a decent way. Their overall discussions were focused on preventing vulnerabilities, improving the process for finding and fixing them, and when that fails and there is a vulnerability, shortening the response time for distributing and implementing the fixes. It's the implementing, for example, that's a big problem in the Log4j. You don't even know where it is. How are we going to replace them all? That's going to be a long-term challenge. So we in the LF took SLSA was definitely part of the discussion. We certainly mentioned them. I'm sure several times. And we in the LF tried to come up with something that gave an overall summary of kind of the major moving parts. And so basically right now we're still working that, but just so you know, this is kind of right now how we're trying to group things down. Securing the open source factories, basically the build and distribution systems, which is the fourth one there. And really to some extent the fifth one and sixth one as well, I think is where SLSA in particular slots in. Comments, questions?
Did SLSA come up in the discussion at all?
We certainly mentioned it. Now, one challenge I have is that the meeting was, LF and a couple of folks gave very short presentations, and then a lot of the time was split into working groups. So I only saw the working group I was in. I honestly don't know what all the working groups discussed. But I guess the good news is that it was raised, things were discussed. They want to have another meeting 3 months from then. And at least from the LF perspective, I think we're going to use this opportunity to try to convince anybody else who's not already involved in these efforts to get involved, both industry and frankly government. The one issue that I would say and add, and maybe that's an issue I should note here, is this is this is not U.S. only. Okay. So we are happy when governments say, hey, we're concerned, here's some money, please fix, but we don't want this to be a U.S. only effort. So we are trying to also talk to a number of different governments of really remarkable different sizes, and try to find a way to collaborate anywhere from funding some of these things, helping getting some people and expertise lent. We'll take all sorts of crazy ideas. Sorry for the high. I'm sorry it's a little high level. I'm abstract, but I'm not sure where to go. So trying to make it quick and short.
Yeah,
Michael, questions? I'm sorry. Michael had his hand raised. Do you have a question?
Yeah. You mentioned other governments. I'm very interested in that as well. Do you have similar events started to bubble up in other, like, do you have any information about other similar events showing up in other governments? And should we in fact maybe start a, like, even just a section of this doc where we actually start to build out contacts and points of interest with other large regulatory entities, whether it's the EU or a country or whatever?
I haven't been told that the list of countries that have been mooted is secret, so I guess I can say them. I mean, really, we're not particularly limited. Countries we've noted might be especially interested include like Japan and Germany, and Singapore. So
But
I don't know if
not,
there's
but
I
not,
don't know if there's a need in this doc for contacts per se, because I think the issue really is much more making the contacts, not writing the names
but
down.
I guess, like, we not had word of like a similar cybersecurity style summit happening in Japan or the UK at this point, and I'm sort of surprised that that hasn't happened. Obviously, there's a lot of tech in the US, so a lot of the players are US based, but that's not exclusive. And certainly the problem is completely agnostic as to which country you're currently getting security problems from.
That's right. That's this is an international issue, not a U.S. issue.
Yeah.
That said, you know, I think you know, some country has to start. So I mean, and U.S. is as perfectly reasonable as any. But in fact, that was one of the LF's requests to the U.S. government folks, is they have contacts with some of these other governments, because you know, government to government interaction is a thing, and we're hoping that they will be able to put some of us in contact with some of them. So think of that as it's a starter, it's an ongoing. Hopefully things will come of it. I don't know what will come of it yet. If you don't mind, I would propose that we hear from Mark Lodato, and then Trishank, and then Bob Calloway. I'm not sure. The order showing on my screen may not be the right order, but Mark?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right order, but either way, that's fine. One thing that I think, like, it kind of seems to be a recurring topic that we should figure out is, right now, SLSA is focused on integrity, which is protecting against tampering, and there's some amount of identifying dependencies, which is also used for vulnerability management. And it sounds like most of the effort during the discussions at the White House and a lot of other things around vulnerabilities, which is probably the more pressing issue. And there's also an issue of like developer trust, of like what was it called, where the
Developer identity?
No, like the issue of like, do you trust the package at all? Like that one thing where the developer like messed up their own package.
Right, colors and faker, yes.
Yeah. And so I think it's worth us thinking about either figuring out how SLSA fits into the broader supply chain security picture, or expanding it to covering these larger issues. Yeah, anyway, I just wanted to plug that if anyone has thoughts or wants to participate. It's definitely an area that I think we need to expand in.
Yeah, and it's okay if SLSA doesn't do everything for everybody either. I mean, there is the risk of, if you try to do everything, you end up doing nothing useful. So, you know, if it can be expanded in certain areas that make sense, that's great. If we can declare this is this area and these other folks do this other, I think that's fantastic too. So I don't expect to solve that right here in this meeting, but it's a great point.
Either we expand in a way that keeps its clarity and usefulness, or we make it clear where's the limits and where do you go, you know, how does it interact?
If someone's looking at that wider issue, I'd really like to be involved in it, because we've spent a lot of time trying to piece that together, really looking at it from an end-to-end perspective and where SLSA fits in and other things. And I think, Mark, you're spot on. It now might be the time to figure out, where does it fit? Does it expand, or where does that go? So I'd be keen on having that conversation if others are ready for that.
Should we add that to the next one of these working groups meetings, or do like another one-off? start the
I would
discussion
propose do
issues.
it in the next regular meeting.
Yeah, let's try that. Maybe.
I think that's a good idea.
Cool.
Happy to.
Trishank, I think you were next.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Thanks for the White House update. That's really interesting. Do you know how, if people here were interested to join working groups? Do you know if there's a process to apply or?
Okay, a process to apply for what? For being a White House working group? For being a Open SSF working group?
Right,
Whose working
exactly.
group?
So the question becomes, which working groups are working with the White House, and how can we help if we wanted to? So do we join the Open SSF?
Yeah, join the Open SSF is the quick answer. That's always the right answer. Or join the LF, join the Open SSF, join the specific groups working on the things you're interested in. Yeah, so SLSA is obviously an important project. As far as more generally, you'll be shocked to know I don't control the White House. Tomorrow's not looking good either. So as far as what the White House does or doesn't do, really that's an internal matter. I know that they had another meeting a week later internal to the US government. I wasn't there. I just, I know from somebody I know that they had a meeting or they were going to have a meeting, but that's all I have. In the end, the U.S. government decides what the U.S. government's going to do, and of course, that's a whole bunch of people trying to figure out within a big organization what they're going to do. As far as hey, what do we do to address? I think really it's join the various groups within the Open SSF, or more generally, join the groups trying to solve the problem. I think the White House is basically looking for existing groups trying to already resolve the problem and maybe trying to give them help in various ways.
I see.
The U.S. government in general doesn't want to create new things unless it thinks it needs to. It would like to work with existing things that are actually solving the problem if there's something that already exists. That at least that's my interpretation from that past meeting, which actually makes sense. I mean, why? Please don't reinvent the wheel if folks are already working on building one.
Absolutely. That's actually very good to know. Thanks. Yeah, because one of my worries would be something, how do I put this? Yeah, reinventing the wheel from the top down might not be the best idea either.
Yeah, and to be fair, a whole bunch of folks did know that. I mean, it's also interesting to see at the top level. I mean, they do have some security expertise. I mean, I met one of the government folks used to be the lead for the Chrome browser security team. So it's not like they can't spell software, but there's a spotty level of knowledge. Okay, there are some knowledgeable people. There are some less knowledgeable people there. But again, they don't want to, I don't think they want to reinvent the wheel. They would like industry to solve an industry problem. And if industry needs help, they would like to work with and not against. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, Bob Calloway, I think you're next.
Yeah, thanks. Given the format, I don't know how much of this actually got to come out at all. I'm looking at the list of our tasks here from the LF perspective. It seems like not a whole lot that would be contentious or disagreeable, but I'm curious if any of the other dialogues were there points where people were either disagreeing on approach or just in kind of areas where there seems to be a misalignment in terms of how. I imagine most people are not going to argue that this is worthwhile work. So
okay. By the way, we're being recorded. I don't mind being recorded. There were some contentions. You'll be shocked to know that humans don't always agree on everything. And
yeah, I'm not asking for names, just even if you want to just keep it high level.
I'm going to give names. There's no point in hiding it. Okay, so I guess I fear that this will look like some sort of Apache versus Linux Foundation hate each other, and that's not at all I mean. In fact, I know Mark Cox over there. He's a sharp cookie, but I think those of us within the Linux Foundation, and I think that includes Brian Bellendorf, who, by the way, is one of the founders of the Apache Software Foundation, have a disagreement with the leaders of the Apache Software Foundation, in that the Apache Software Foundation leaders right now believe that Log4j is a well-run project. There are no problems. We just need some more contributors. Now, I'm all for adding more contributors. I don't think adding new contributors would have changed Log4j at all. I also think that we should be careful not to shoot messengers, because we all make mistakes. I make mistakes. I write security vulnerabilities. There are experts around the world who write security vulnerabilities. Okay, that's not the issue, and we shouldn't pummel people for making mistakes. But it is reasonable to say the process as it is not good enough. We need to change. And this is, I think, a distinction between many of us within the LF, and I think many of our partners, member companies, don't think that everything is fine and nothing needs to change. I think things do need to change and be made better, which is why we have groups like SLSA, where we're trying to figure out what are the requirements, what things do we do to make things better, not just keep doing what we're doing. So if you're participating in SLSA, you already agree that things need to change and be made better.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Sure. So, and I do want to clarify, this is not because, oh, we think the Apache Software Foundation is evil. That is not, absolutely not the message. But we think that these things need to change in a broader way than just we need a few more contributors. Jonathan? Oh, Michael,
Hello.
you said the same thing.
Yeah, I have two questions here, and you can answer them in whatever order, but I'm just going to pose them both to you real fast. What was the conversations around funding for open source and these sorts of problems in terms of getting funding to maintainers? And the other question was there any discussion around the fallout that evolved due to this Log4j vulnerability around what was the name of the company that found the vulnerability escapes me, but the Chinese government came down and said, gave that company a bunch of, shit for not disclosing the vulnerability first to the Chinese government vulnerability handling process first. And so basically that company is getting booted out of the threat intel feed until as a result and as repercussions for the Log4j handling.
And it's Alibaba, and they're getting a huge fine.
Okay, so what's the story
I
there?
am fully aware of this situation. Thank you for your interest. I don't know enough about Chinese politics, so I'm just going to acknowledge that I'm aware of it, and I don't have any more to add because I honestly don't understand the full what's going on there. So I'm going to have to leave that to others who understand Chinese politics and contracts and other situations better than I do. Does that make sense?
I mean, basically, was there any concern by the U.S. government around that sort of repercussions that were played out around that, or is that just not a conversation that he even had? It seems to set a precedent that vulnerabilities need to be disclosed in a specific way. Chinese government has become more and more controlling of vulnerabilities. They don't let security researchers disclose, go to hacking competitions outside of the country, stuff like that. So I'm just wondering if there's been any kind of concern or discussion in that area. I'm not,
Yeah. Okay. Short answer. Yes, there's concern.
Yeah.
I will observe that the U.S. government is not that different, although it doesn't impose that on external companies. Within the U.S. government, if you are required, if you work for the U.S. government or one of its contractors and you find a vulnerability, you are supposed to report it to a process called the Vulnerabilities Equities Process. Who then decide whether or not to report that to the supplier or to be used for exploitation. It's called the VEP. The VEP is extremely opaque. We don't know how many are processed. We don't know how many are adjudicated in which way. I am on public record as saying that the U.S. government should at least publicly report those kind of statistics because it's a very opaque process today. And after that, I'm gonna.
Question of funding.
That's all. That's what I got.
What was the discussion around funding and funding into open source?
There was a discussion that LF said, hey, we need to have money needs to be put here. We don't care really if it's the US government, other governments, private industry, probably a combination of those. They acknowledge that funding's important, and that's one of those things that I expect to be discussed in the 90-day point. So the last Side House meeting was much more of a discuss issues, discuss options.
I think, Tom, last question, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna have to leave. I should have left earlier, and I haven't. I'm sorry.
there's a time check. Something about needing to leave and needing to move the time. Do that conversation need to happen first before that? In the chat?
Yeah, I just left a comment on there. A few of us did. I personally can't make 30 minutes earlier work all the time, but I think we can send a survey out, do a doodle poll. We'll have to get some help.
This meeting time is in general good for me. It's just I've had a collision of multiple weird collisions on it.
No, I don't think it's just you, David. Joshua was asking.
Okay, just in general.
Yeah, always is that like the third hardest problem to solve with engineering is meeting times now? Naming, counting, now meeting times.
Yeah, let's see here. I mean, half an hour earlier for
we could take that offline. We will. Yeah. I'll start a thread about that, or Kim, unless you.
Yeah. I mean, it's good for me, real quick. So I mean, sure. Yeah. But yeah, doodle poll is probably the answer. All right. Anyway, I'm supposed to be in another meeting, so.
Yeah. Do you want to jump, David, or do you want to take one more quick question from Tom?
I can take one more quick question. All right. Go ahead, Tom.
Hi, I saw that CISA was also involved. I'm curious because SLSA is like a superset of the SBOM question in some way. So I'm wondering if you could expand on what interaction with like Alan Friedman and that whole effort was present in that meeting, and or if there's any other collaboration between them.
Okay, Alan Friedman was there at the meeting. He did speak. I will note that the White House meeting was really more focused on getting input from industry. So he did speak, he did participate, he spoke up, he listened to industry, but this particular White House meeting was much more trying to get information from industry for them to try to help figure out what to do next. But yeah, SBOMs are obviously important, and they were discussed a number of times. In fact, one of the 4 working groups was specifically on SBOMs. So, okay. Yeah, sorry to say hi and then bounce, but it's just life. So thank you. And happy to take other questions. But I think the quick bottom line is, SLSA got visibility at the U.S. White House level. Specific mentions. There's a number of folks who at least are now aware of it. A whole lot of the folks in the White House meeting were actually already Open SSM members and already knew about SLSA, but we now have a few more who are at least more aware of it. And hopefully we can turn this into greater participation in SLSA and really many of these other security-related projects. And I think actually we will. I think we're going to be able to use this to get more involvement and hopefully more buy-in as well.
Cool. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. All right.
And Ken, I'm going to make you, I think I'm going to make you host if I can.
Yeah, sure. Whatever. And then next we have Sean, are you on the call?
I am, yes. So unfortunately, I'm not going to demo our platform today because we just put in some performance enhancements yesterday, and I want to let those settle before we start doing things like demos. But I do want to kind of give a brief intro to the way that we build stuff and what the platform is and what it does, and some of the issues we see with some of the requirements for SLSA compliance. So I'd also like to point out that our esteemed CTO, Scott Robertson, is on the call today as well. So, hey, Scott.
Hey, everybody. Good seeing you again, Kim. Congratulations on the promotion, I guess. I don't know if you call it a promotion, but the appointment.
Okay, so the Active State platform it's an extension of what Active State used to do, but it goes way beyond what Active State used to do. So Active State has traditionally in the past been providing complete distributions for Perl, Python, and Tickle for multiple platforms that people could kind of just download and use. So we would, you would basically get what Active State decided was going to be in that package. So you would get Perl and a whole bunch of other packages that we curated and kept. What we decided to do with the platform is create something that effectively is able to build an arbitrary set of open source components and glue them together into a runtime for you. Where that's focused at the moment is still being able to produce Perl and Python runtimes, but you get to choose what packages go in. So the platform has multiple components, one of which is that we have two different front ends, one of which is web-based and one of which is command line based. And they basically collate requirements from users in terms of what they want to get out. So they'll say, okay, well, I want Python 3.9 and I want requests and TensorFlow and whatever. That then gets passed into a component that we have called our solver, which is a PubGrub-based SAT solver that does all the dependency resolution. And we do our dependency resolution all the way down, not just down as far as the ecosystem goes. We will take it down to C libraries that need to be imported as well. So things outside of the typical ecosystem for the language that you're talking about will go down further into that. And so we'll actually give you things like libxml2, zlib, all of those things, kind of everything you need to support your runtime, and we'll provide it to you in a complete package. That package you can install with our command line tool, which can then either deploy that to your system or give you a virtualized environment. And so we have a general solution providing you with a virtualized development environment for any particular mix of things that you can build on our platform. Once the solver is done, what it's doing and what it's going to do as we go forward is create something that we call a build plan. And that is a description of everything that needs to be built and the order in which it needs to be built and how the inputs from source code and other build steps feed into later build steps. I think probably easiest. Yeah, I mean, I have a picture, if I can share for a second, just to give you a clue about what build plans look like. So basically, this is kind of a diagrammatic view of our build plan. So this is a simplified one for building the Python core on Windows, for example. So we start with our source. We know that, for example, in this case, zlib, we build with CMake. We have a build script called CMake Builder, which will produce an artifact. That feeds as input into the Python core builder along with the Python core source. That then builds our Python core artifact. And the request source and the Python core artifact then feed into the build of requests. Let me move this around a little bit, because it's hopefully not moving too fast. From which we build a wheel, and then from the wheel we build our own platform artifact. And then there's some other steps here that I want to go into a little bit into a little bit more detail in a minute. But basically that's kind of the flow of how things happen in our system. Everything that happens here in one of these build steps is done in its own isolated container. So everything is hermetic in that regard. These build plans are they're set in stone at a particular timestamp. So whenever you ask for the same requirements, you will always get the same output. So in that case, we've got reproducible builds, and the platform makes guarantees on that part. So I think that kind of, and then, yeah, so basically we have the state tool, which is our CLI, which can install all of these things. And we're working on ways to do things like on Windows, be able to take all of the outputs of the build process and create, for example, a Windows MSI installer based on all the things that we built. Now, I want to get into a few of the issues that we have with SLSA compliance here. And I think one of them one of them specifically relates to Windows.
Hey, Sean, we have a couple of questions, it looks like.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to take those now. Tom, should we start with you?
Sorry, I actually never put my hand down after David.
Okay.
Yes, but I am a genuine hand. So
Okay,
yeah,
hello.
and I'm coming kind of new, my first SLSA meeting. So hi everybody. I'm from Goldman Sachs. I lead engineering for open source there. So just trying to understand kind of the goals behind this. Essentially, you're trying to build everything and literally everything from source, and then do it in a secure way, right? So
Yeah.
there's like no artifacts that would actually go into this process. It would only be from source.
Yes. So basically, our starting point is always source code, and we work from the source code from pretty much everything from a bare Linux distro with GCC on and installed, and then everything else is kind of built by the platform and layered on top. And so every time you need something, so if you need a build tool, we'll build the build tool, and that will go into the container as well. So basically, the idea is to take everything from source code and produce usable artifacts at the end.
Right, and do it in a way that's actually like reasonable, right? That you don't have to like basically a platform for that. Got it. That's pretty cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So for Windows specifically, we have this this step that we want to introduce for Authenticode signing, using Microsoft's Authenticode system to sign dynamically loadable libraries and executables, so that the Windows operating system can understand how to trust or how much to trust the things that we build. The awkward thing here in terms of hermeticity is that Authenticode signatures require a timestamp, and they require a timestamp from an external timestamp server, which is trusted and signs the timestamp itself. So the problem we have there is that for that, we need to allow network access. And it also means that if we were talking about reproducing these builds, every time you do that build, you get a new timestamp, and the bits that come out the other end are different. And I know there's a get out of jail option for these things, for hermeticity and reproducibility, but we would need to use them for pretty much everything we ever built on Windows, because everything we do on Windows is going to go through this step in order to detect kind of our executables and dynamic load libraries. So yeah, that's one of the issues that we have with it, and I'd like to kind of open up a little bit of discussion on that once I'm done through with this. The other thing is that, we now, this is a very small build plan. It doesn't really cover an awful lot of what we can do. We now have basically also offline mirrors of pretty much all of PyPI and CPAN and a lot of C libraries. So we also have the ability to detect whether anything changes upstream. But we have this offline mirror of pretty much everything, and that's where we grab our source code from when we're doing this build. We have a separate ingestion pipeline, which goes through and trawls PyPI, CPAN, and a couple of other repositories for source code. We download those, verify them against their signatures, and then we store them offline, and we have our own kind of mechanism for checksumming and signing those as well. The problem that we have is that we're now looking at having tens of millions of different pieces of software that we can build in terms of all of the kind of different packages you can get from PyPI and CPAN and all their relevant versions. So rather than having a build script for every one of those, we have a build script that can generally build a Perl module. We have a one that can generally build a Python module. And then we have separate ones for things like the Python core. And we have, like, for example, this, we're talking about building zlib. We build it with something which is a CMake builder, which is a build script that bootstraps CMake. And we have similar ones for things like auto tools and various other kind of build systems that we can effectively puppet. The problem we have then is that rather than having tens of millions of individual parameterless build scripts, we have in the order of hundreds of build scripts instead, and we can build multiple things with those build scripts. The problem is that some things, when we're doing things like when we want to bootstrap auto tools, AutoTools obviously has a whole bunch of different parameters that you need to feed in to get the package that you want out. And we need to encode those. And we encode those separately from the build script as configuration for that build script. So we have the CMake builder, and then we have a list of options that we will poke through from CMake, or from the CMake builder down to CMake itself, which kind of makes the actual CMake builder parameterized. There are other dimensions to this as well, in that we also want our users to be able to do things like say, okay, well, I want everything you're going to build me built with the debug flags turned on. And so the users can, at that top level, say, okay, well, I want a debuggable build. And that will trickle down through options to all of our builders to say, okay, the user has requested debug in their build. How do you actually apply debug information, or how do you get debug information out of this build? And every builder will react differently to that. So again, there are parameters there. And there are other dimensions to this as well. So whether they want statically linked build, whether they want thread-enabled builds, whether they want GPU-enabled builds. So if we were going to build a system that had individual build scripts for every one of these potential build configurations, we would be looking at kind of potentially hundreds of millions, if not billions, of individual build scripts. So we have a problem there in terms of how we describe this system, and whether we can describe it as parameterless when we have these kind of options at the top level. So yeah, that's a brief overview of how the platform builds stuff, and the problems that we have, just right off the bat with kind of SLSA compliance. So yeah, let's open it up to questions. Tom, I think you had your hand up first.
I'm sorry, is there someone else? So thank you for sharing. So my initial impression is that a lot of the trouble comes is related to the boundary that SLSA that SLSA covers. You are describing the top level configuration and how users can configure that and put settings there, which then influences all of those other individual boxes. And I wonder if one approach is to consider that that configuration is what will eventually produce the MSI out at the other end, right? Mm-hmm. Can you just consider that top level builds that top level configuration as the build script, and reference that in the SLSA provenance that is used for the MSI build process, which
yeah. I think if we did look at it at that higher level, we could kind of look at it and say, yes, okay, it is sealed and parameterless once you get to that point. But we want to provide, for all of these kind of intermediate artifacts that we have within, we want to provide, attestation as to, where they came from and their provenance. So I'm wondering how, whether that actually gels with the whole concept.
So my understanding is that the parameterless requirement really comes from the desire that end users can't nefariously influence the build and provide potentially malicious parameters. And so one thing that could potentially be explored is, can whatever process is reads the top level config and then winds up giving instructions to the sort of individual steps, if that process is automated and is not under the control of an individual user, if that process could be could actually add the config as another material section. I don't know exactly how that would be reflected in the provenance. I don't know if we would need to adjust the the requirements in like any way, but I think that would meet the spirit of the goals, right? Because like there's no user that could actually that can actually affect that.
Yeah, and that is an anti-goal of the platform, is to allow, allowing users direct access to modifying specific build parameters down at that level is an anti-goal of the platform.
Right. And then regarding the MSI signing, I like the approach that I usually consider taking is that like I would want to evaluate the salsa provenance just prior to signing, so that you have the like unsigned thing, which is probably reproducible, and you have the salsa provenance for that, and then you throw it over the wall to like the signing process, and like whatever comes out of that is a separate story, because yes, some signing operations do require network connectivity and timestamps and all of
that. Okay. Mark, I think you were next.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with Tom's suggestions. Would you mind filing GitHub issues for these? I think they're great points, and I feel like, as Tom said, I feel like they're solvable problems, but I think the solution, in my opinion, we should fix the spec to allow these sorts of things, right? Like that is what you're doing is like completely and utterly in line with the spirit of Salsa 4, and we just need to fix the spec to work around these kind of nuances, because right now it was written, not anticipating these particular nuances.
Okay, cool. Tom, I think you were next again.
Hi, yeah. So, I mean, we face exactly the same problem in the Nix world of like, we have these general like build Python package, and that thing has parameters, right? But the end result that our approach to that problem is that we then bake all that into something that is a artifact of a build plan. And then that thing doesn't have parameters anymore because it's been locked down. And so I suspect a similar approach is applicable, and it's something I'd like to see baked in a little bit more into like how the standard works. There are situations where you can't quite do that because something is going to change, like the timestamp example that you talked about. And that's why I really think that there needs to be kind of this separation between here is the artifact and the part of the provenance that is pure in some sense, right? Or it seems like we're talking about a similar sense of purity. And then there's the portion of it which is impure that can reference into the pure parts about like, oh, this is a timestamp for that. This is a timestamp for that artifact. And then that way you have this like nice clean separation between, rather than mixing it all up. Because if you mix it, then all of it's impure and all of it's kind of generated on a whim rather than being reproducible. It would be very embarrassing if the provenance for reproducible software was itself not reproducible.
Right. Okay, Bella.
Yeah, hi. So not so much from a reproducibility perspective, but like from a malicious script perspective, which is what I'm understanding as part of this, right? Like somebody putting in a parameter that then goes and does something malicious. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sure. So like, I think I would probably differentiate between a Boolean parameter and just like an arbitrary string parameter, right? And that might be something that you can take into account as well, right? So Boolean is like generally safe. You can't put in anything arbitrary. And then beyond Boolean, right? Anything that has predefined sets of like clearly well understood values would generally be safer as well.
Yeah. So basically what these things have is we have a notion of, we call it everything that we can build, every piece of, every module we can build is, we refer to as an ingredient, because we were using a kind of kitchen model to kind of describe everything when we were starting with. And we have this notion of ingredient options. And these are the parameters that can be passed through, but those are fixed as well. Users can't modify those. They're just kind of things that we know and we are baked into the system. And those options can react to things at the top level like debug static, threaded, GPU. So basically they will react in different ways. So all those things are kind of predetermined. But yeah, that's kind of how that fits together.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, sorry, I had a hand up and I put it down. I've heard the words pure and impure used in various contexts, and sort of this whole conversation was right about sort of the parameterization. I'm perhaps naive in this thing, but I really think about this in terms of like entities of control, right? There are people who have control over the source code and can make changes to it, but how it gets turned from source into some other artifact needs to be a thing that they can't just arbitrarily change. And then there are, you know, entities who have control over that build config, including all its parameterized, maybe fully flattened out into whatever the mess it ends up being. That's a different entity. Just understanding those from a sort of a security point of view is like, who has access to each of those points of change? I'm less concerned about reproducibility and more concerned about, I can do it again, understanding the same parameters, I can apply it again and get, you know, at least what I consider to be a functionally equivalent result. And that somebody who's access to the code can't go off and use that to go and do other strange things, such as, you know, allowing their particular PR to get signed in a way that shouldn't or something like that. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of a little bit prior to how, you know, to where our build chain comes in. But yeah, I see that, and I think you know, it would be nice to be able to specify in which ways we've degraded some of the requirements. So, you know, when we say, okay, well, we did, you know, here's an artifact prior to authenticode signing, and here's its provenance all the way back, and here's one that's been authenticode signed, here's its provenance, and we had to degrade hermeticity and reproducibility because we had to go out for a timestamp. So I think it would be nice to be able to be very, very specific about how we're degrading some of these requirements along the way.
Helpful, thanks.
Okay, Mark, yeah, have your hand up again?
Yeah, I just want to briefly mention that in case it's not clear, the motivation for the parameterless requirement is around understanding what like should be okay, right? Mm-hmm. If you if it's maybe it's okay like to have debug versus optimized, or maybe it's not, I don't know. Or maybe it's okay to set the optimization level like 1, 2, 3, 4, and those are just known safe. And then so when you consume the provenance, you have effectively some policy saying which parameters are okay and which aren't. It's simplest if we just say just no parameters, and then it's definitely, if there's no parameters, it's definitely safe. And that's why we kind of erred on that side. But I think there's room to loosen that a bit by still getting across the intention, which is that the consumer has a way of knowing which, you know, that only safe parameters were used.
Okay, Tom, you have your hand up again, I think. Nope, okay. Scott, you have yours up.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback off of what Mark was saying. Like when we think about the systems and designs, it's about modeling what parameters can be used and the reactions to them so that we know what they're about before we start doing the builds, and then they can't be modified. So I like kind of the things that you're suggesting there, Mark, that will definitely help aid us as we keep working on our goals and be able to feed that back in. It's just really about, I come from a functional programming background, and that's kind of where we think about that kind of entire world is like, we should know everything going in before we start this whole process so we can make really, really strong guarantees through the entire pipeline as we're building it out. So.
Cool. Okay, Jacques.
Yeah, I was wondering, sorry about the noise in the background. Zoom meeting is great. I was wondering to what degree this could be framed as like a legal space of configurations, because you can think of each configuration flag providing another dimension, and particular configuration is a point in multiple dimensions, and therefore you can say there's a space which is legal to parameterize and a space which is not. So you could say the dimension defined by this parameter is no longer permissible or can only accept these ranges and so on. I'm wondering if that's too abstract, but I think it's one way of framing it. I know that in Java they talk about coordinates as the terminology that they can conversion, which I think is pretty handy.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, the platform has the ability to reject a particular configuration as invalid. So I think that's something that we could explore. At the moment, you know, it's used really to say, okay, well, we just don't know how to do this. We can't build this that way, or you know, that's just precluded by something else. We don't have anything that really kind of makes a judgment call on a particular set of requested parameters to say whether something is valid, especially not from a security perspective. Yeah, I mean, nobody's telling us what the use case for their stuff is, so you can't say, well, debug on production is a bad idea. So we don't have that level of information. But yeah, it's an interesting thought that it is, it is a multi-dimensional thing that, these things are all orthogonal in terms of whether you can turn them on or off. So yeah, I think that's an interesting take on it.
A question that sometimes comes up is when you do have these two kind of variations, is that like something that is somehow semantically like they're the same thing with one variation, or do you then consider them to be so completely different that they're divorced from each other because of the potential ramifications? Like an example of this would be like enable or disable CUDA.
Yes.
Right. For some sort of, like, that's such a big change. It just fundamentally makes it either compatible or incompatible with other portions of your system.
Basically, every artifact that we build in the system gets a deterministic artifact ID, which is effectively the Merkle tree of all the dependencies and inputs for that artifact that generated that artifact. So, the build script itself, any parameters that were passed to the build script, the specific source code that was applied, and any top level build parameters that were applied are all part of that identity. So if you change something and say, okay, at the top level, I would like debug out, we treat that as an entirely different build. Everything from one end to the other is completely unique to when compared to the non-debug one. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm back to Kim.
Thanks, Sean. This was awesome. Yeah, definitely. I like to see the follow-up issues if you don't mind filing them, and then see where the discussion goes on this. We only have a couple minutes left. Mike, I don't know if talking about SSF is going to happen in the next minute.
No, yeah, just a quick update. Plan to donate it, being worked through. Probably we'll have more details at the supply chain integrity meeting. But yeah, I want to give a couple minutes to new members.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, any new members on the call that want to say a quick hello before we all drop off?
Hi, just want to say hi. My name is Brandon. I'm the co-chair for CNCF Tax Security. Michael has been doing a great job and kind of like bridging the groups together. I know we have kind of a little bit of overlap. Yeah, so I wanted to say hi, reach out and say that, we are looking for places where we can collaborate. I know we have like the SSF work, we have the catalog work, which kind of needs a little bit of updating. So anyway, we can kind of collaborate on that. I've also just joined the Google open source security team. So going to be diving a lot deeper into the SLSA and supply chain stuff. And so I hope to actively engage and contribute to the community.
Awesome, welcome. Yeah, I think if you want to do like a quick preso on what you're all up to at the tag working group in a future meeting, that would be awesome.
Awesome. I'll sign myself up.
Thanks.
Sure. Hi, I introduced myself briefly before, but just wanted to say like maybe slightly lengthier hello. So I'm Bella Wiseman. So I lead engineering for open source at Goldman Sachs. We recently joined the OpenSSF. And we're thinking a lot about supply chain security, specifically in the financial industry, and kind of how we can, secure things a little bit better. So definitely like, enjoying listening and learning and kind of hearing the things that are going on in the broader industry and how we can bring them back to our bank and make things better for our customers. Thanks. Nice to meet everybody.
Awesome. Welcome.
It's been a while. I've been out for a long time. So hi, Jonathan Leitschuh. I formerly of Gradle, but I'm now working for Human. I was awarded the Dan Kaminsky Fellowship. So I will be spending the next year doing open source security research. The Dan Kaminsky Fellowship was created to commemorate the memory of Dan Kaminsky, who was the famous security researcher who passed away tragically last year. And so, you know, putting out internet fires and finding security vulnerabilities and fixing them at scale. That's what I'm up to for the next year.
Nice. Congrats on that too. Looking forward to seeing what you do.
Wietse Venema, I joined my colleagues Mark and Tom from Google in SLSA effort, and so I'm working myself into the subject. Still a bit of fly on the wall at this time.
Welcome. I gotta run. Nathan, do you want to go really quick? Your hands up.
Yeah, I'll say hi really quickly. Nathan Smith. I'm working on the Sigstore project a little bit and just generally lurking around many open source security supply chain things. Nice to meet you all. I'll be around for a little bit, I'm sure. Bye.
Welcome. Scott.
Yeah, Scott Robertson, CTO of Active State. I've been promising Zach that I would be joining this meeting. Today was like fortuitous that I could join for the first time, and man, I love it. And I'm going to start rearranging my calendar to join more. A lot of great talent here. It's a pleasure meeting everybody.
Okay, I gotta go. Thanks all.